The clock in Pasig said just after midnight when the Phil Sports Arena stopped being a building and started being one long, unbroken sound. 8,000 seats, a free public watch party, and on the screen at the front of the room, Alexandra Eala had just taken the second set from Jasmine Paolini, 6-4, forcing a decider in the Wimbledon round of 16. This is what people mean now when they say the Alex Eala effect, not a stat line, not a headline, a room in a country that had, until very recently, no professional tennis tradition to speak of, staying awake past midnight on a Monday because a 21-year-old from Quezon City was 3,000 miles away on a lawn in London, playing for a place in the last 8 of a Grand Slam. She would lose that third set. She would lose the match. And somehow the room got louder anyway.
To thank everybody who is here.
That's the part of the story that doesn't show up in the draw sheet, and it's the part we're going to spend the next 17 minutes unpacking properly. To understand why 8,000 Filipinos gathered in an arena in Pasig after midnight, you have to rewind 3 years to a graduation ceremony on the island of Majorca. The player handing out the diplomas at the Rafael Nadal Academy that day was Iga Świątek, then world number 1, freshly crowned French Open champion. One of the graduates walking up to accept her certificate was Alex Eala. 3 years later, on the 4th of July, 2026, the student walked onto center court and beat the teacher 7-6 in a first-set tiebreak that went to 11-9, then 6-2. Before Eala, according to the Los Angeles Times, the highest-ranked Filipina in WTA singles history was Maricris Gents, who reached number 284 in 1999. Eala is currently ranked number 32, with reporting from Philippine Star suggesting her post-Wimbledon ranking will climb further. That's not a leap, that's an entire staircase. Which brings us to the honest question this story asks, and the one this channel wants to ask cleanly rather than sentimentally, is what we're watching a Cinderella moment or a structural shift? Because those are two very different things, and the difference matters, especially for a Filipino audience that has been burned before by athletes who were called the future and then quietly weren't. The Cinderella case is real. She's 21. She has 0 WTA singles titles. She was, as recently as June 20th of this year, ranked as low as the 60s. She's played one meaningful fourth round at a slam. If you wanted to argue that this is a beautiful moment that fades, the numbers give you room to argue it. But the structural case is where the evidence actually lives. In March of 2026, Eala reached a career high of world number 29, the highest any Filipina had ever climbed, by a margin most people don't even register. In the run-up to Wimbledon, she won the Birmingham Open on grass. She reached the semifinal in Berlin, beating world number 2 Elena Rybakina along the way. She was invited to play doubles with Venus Williams at Bad Homburg. And then she came to Wimbledon, was seeded for the first time at a Grand Slam at number 29, and beat the defending champion on center court. That is not a Cinderella pattern. Cinderella wins once. Alex Eala has now taken Iga Świątek down twice in 15 months, once in Miami in 2025, once at Wimbledon in 2026. The word for that isn't luck, it's evidence. So let's walk through the evidence, not to prosecute a case, but to lay it out honestly in the order it actually happened so you can decide what it adds up to. Start with what the Philippine state did. When Eala's fourth-round match against Paolini was scheduled for a start time that landed near midnight in Manila, 3 government-linked bodies, the Philippine Sports Commission, the Metropolitan Manila Development Authority, and the Philippine Tennis Association, opened the Phil Sports Arena in Pasig, capacity around 8,000, as a free public watch party. This is confirmed by the Philippine Sports Commission's own social channels and by Inquirer Sports. It's the sort of infrastructure a country stands up for a boxing world title fight or for the national basketball team. It is not, historically, what the Philippines has done for tennis, and it wasn't a one-off. There had been another watch party for the Świątek match. There will almost certainly be another one for the US Open. What that tells you is not that Filipinos love a bandwagon. Every country loves a bandwagon. What it tells you is that institutions in Manila are now allocating resources against her calendar. That is a structural signal, not a sentimental one. Now take the match itself. On Saturday, July 4th, Center Court 2030 local time, a late slot match under a closed roof against the defending champion. The BBC's own reporting confirms that Eala saved 8 of the 11 break points she faced, hit 24 winners against 21 unforced errors, and closed out the second set 6-2. The New York Times athletic desk described the result as possibly the toughest loss in an already difficult year for Świątek. This wasn't Świątek playing badly, this was Świątek being outplayed. And the crowd knew it. According to Wimbledon's own official channels, Eala received a standing ovation when the match ended. Not for showing up, not for effort, for winning. But if you want to understand the Alex Eala effect properly, you have to zoom out from the court. The Los Angeles Times, in a feature published on June 29th, described what happens now wherever Eala plays, and the language is worth quoting directly. Nurses from Birmingham, engineers from Berlin, students from Melbourne, families from Toronto. A flag appears in the stands, then another, then chants in Tagalog. At the Australian Open in January, Filipino fans queued in unmoving lines outside Court 6, not to watch her play, but to watch her practice. Court 6 was over capacity for a practice session. That's the piece that the ranking, and the head-to-head record, and the prize money, which now sits, per the WTA's official site, at $871,438 for the season, none of those numbers capture, because it isn't the tennis exactly that's moving. It's the geography. Every tournament she plays becomes, for 1 week, an outpost of the Philippines. That is what Mary Jo Fernandez meant. That is what she was pointing at. Take a breath here, because this is where the story stops being about a tennis player and starts being about a country. Because there is one more piece of evidence, and it is the largest one. Before Alexandra Eala, in the entire history of women's professional tennis, the highest-ranked Filipina had reached number 284 in the world. That was Maricris Gents in 1999, 27 years ago. The gap between number 284 and Eala's career high of 29 is roughly 255 ranking spots. In a sport with more than 1,500 ranked professionals, that is not incremental improvement. That is a structural break. The two closest historical parallels the Los Angeles Times could find were Li Na of China and Sania Mirza of India, pioneers from massive population, tennis-thin countries who didn't just climb the ranking themselves but changed what their nation's ceiling looked like. That's the company Eala keeps now, not by aspiration, by math, which is why the outside voices are starting to sound different. Mary Jo Fernandez, the ESPN commentator and two-time Olympic gold medalist for the United States in doubles, and a former U.S. Fed Cup captain, someone who has watched the tour's demographics shift for 30 years and has no personal reason to overstate a single player, described the Eala phenomenon this way to the LA Times. It's next level. She brings a whole new demographic and crowd to watch our sport. That is not a Filipino writer being generous. That is one of American tennis's most respected voices telling an American paper that a Filipina has changed something the sport did not know how to change on its own. On BBC's Sports World broadcast, the veteran Filipino sports journalist and former tennis player Diane Castillejo, who has covered the Philippine sports beat for decades, put the diaspora side of it plainly. The match started at 20:30 local time, and everybody on social media was following the match and posting about Filipino pride. I'm getting hundreds and thousands of texts from so many people. Everybody just wants to be a part of it. Everybody felt that they were a part of it, every Filipino. And behind the scenes, Eala's coach since 2023, the Spanish veteran Joan Bosch, told the LA Times that the daily project isn't the wins. It's teaching a 21-year-old to filter the noise. We try to make her understand how important it is to be focused on the tennis. Always have one goal and an achievable goal. She has a good mindset on how to achieve things. Even Venus Williams, after their doubles pairing in Bad Homburg last month, described Eala simply as Very competitive on the court. From Venus, that is not a small sentence. So consider what all of that adds up to structurally. The Philippines has a population of roughly 113 million people, making it the 13th largest country on Earth. Until Eala, it had produced almost no professional tennis and no women's tennis of any tour-relevant kind. The Australian Open moment where fans overwhelmed a practice court was not a Filipino community imported from Manila. It was a diaspora already in Melbourne, already in Sydney, already in Berlin, already in Toronto, already in Birmingham, that had never before had a reason to gather at a tennis court. That is what a cultural symbol is. Not a player who represents a country, but a player who reveals a country to itself in a place it hadn't seen itself before. The Los Angeles Times reported this on July 4th in a sentence that deserves to be quoted verbatim. It said of the Swiatek win that everyone at home was watching Serena. On the grounds, Eala was the whole story. At the tournament where the returning 7-time champion Serena Williams was supposed to own every conversation, the story that traveled, that lit up feeds from London to Manila to San Francisco, was a 21-year-old from a country that had never before produced a slam fourth rounder. That is the shift, that is the effect, and then honestly, she lost. That has to be said clearly, because a story that pretends otherwise is a story that patronizes its subject. 2 days after center court in the fourth round, Jasmine Paolini took the first set from Eala 6-4. Eala came back and won the second 6-4, which is the moment the Phil Sports Arena in Pasig erupted, according to local reporting from the Freeman News. And then the third set slipped away 6-3, and Eala's Wimbledon was over. What matters is what she said next. She did not blame the surface or the schedule or the pressure of the crowd. She told reporters per Tennis 365 that there were so many positives to take from the run. Earlier this year, at the Australian Open, she had publicly acknowledged being overwhelmed by the sheer number of fans lining up just to watch her hit a practice ball. The maturity of the Wimbledon exit, the calm, the accounting of positives, the refusal to sell a false story about herself is not a personality trait. It is 6 months of growth visible in real time. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with a 21-year-old who beat the defending Wimbledon champion on center court on July 4th, 2026, and then lost the next match honestly, and then told the truth about both. It leaves us with a country that stood up an 8,000-seat arena at midnight to watch her play and stayed in it after she lost. It leaves us with the previous ceiling, wrist number 284, Maricruz Gens, 1999, standing not as a comparison but as a marker on the wall of a building she has climbed onto the roof of. And it leaves us with something Alex Eala herself said to the BBC after the Swiatek match, which is the sentence this whole story has been trying to reach. I went to train every day after school with my ruffled socks, light-up shoes, and chubby cheeks. To younger me, this is everything. This goes out to them, my family, and all the girls with ruffled socks and chubby cheeks. It means the world. 3 years ago, Iga Swiatek handed her a piece of paper on a stage in Mallorca. On July 4th, she handed Iga Swiatek the match. The Phil Sports Arena in Pasig isn't going anywhere. Neither is she, and on the visor she wears when she plays, embroidered in Tagalog, are the words she chose to carry with her onto every court in the world. Kapag lumago, hindi nahihinto. Once it grows, it cannot be stopped. If this story resonated with you, subscribe and stay with us, and the US Open Series begins in weeks and will be here for every chapter.